So let's get to it. So today, talking about fear of abandonment. And so I want to talk about different ways that we can recognize this within the relationship, whether it is something that we ourselves might be experiencing in some way, or something that our partner might be experiencing in some way, or being able to recognize, looking forward, if the person we are getting involved in may have this challenge. And so we're going to talk about some signs, we're going to talk about what to do about it, and just basically get a real understanding, because I feel like a lot of people throw the word around talking about fear of abandonment, but they don't necessarily know what it means, or where it comes from, or even how to identify it. So let's talk about a few different ways that the fear of abandonment can show itself inside of a relationship, and where it comes from. So first of all, a lot of times the fear of abandonment comes from our childhood. And people may say, well, I don't know that I necessarily felt abandoned, or maybe I perceived an abandonment. And they may say, well, but I had both parents there, so how could I have that? And what we want to understand is the perception, when we talk about, as we've talked about in many of our sessions, are the core negative beliefs. And those are the feelings that we have that we understand are similar to feelings we may have to different scenarios. Because the scenario doesn't have to be the same. The feelings can be so similar that we then interchange what's happening, because all we're going on is a feeling. Oh, this feels bad, so all these things that feel bad, I just throw into that category, even if the things that are happening are different things. Oh, this kind of thing makes me feel nervous, and so does that. So now all the nervous things go into that bucket, and I think about what makes me nervous. So when we have a presence of a parent, and I mean a presence like having somebody be emotionally available for us, whether we see them physically or not, when we have different events in our childhood where we may expect a parent to show up for us, whether it's physically or emotionally, and they don't, and that's when we start to question the permanence of their presence. When a child is very small, one of the things we do is try to teach object permanence. And when I was little, I actually have this still in my office here. I had a little toy, it was like a drum, and the drum had sort of like a funnel shape on top. And you had a little ball, these little super balls, we used to get in the supermarket for $1. And you take the super ball and you'd spin it, and it would go around and around the funnel, and then eventually it'd fall through the hole. And then the drum part was closed except for one little opening small enough to put your hand through. And the idea was, if the ball went through the drum and disappeared, did the ball stop existing? And so the teaching was, my dad would take my hand and he'd put it inside and he'd make me feel for it, and I'd feel the ball and I'd say, oh, the ball is there. So we teach when we're very small that object permanence means that an object can exist even if we don't see it, it's still there. And that's not something that is a basic human understanding until we're taught it. And so as we are functioning and growing and developing, our belief system that we are developing is, do I believe that this thing, this person, this situation has a permanence to it? Or do I feel like if I don't see it, it's going to disappear and it's not going to come back? So in the very beginning, one of the ways we can develop this fear of abandonment is if we fail to develop a permanency around our parents, around a situation with them, around a belief that they are there for us physically or emotionally. Even if parents divorce, which can often be a very major cause of a fear of abandonment. It doesn't mean you don't see one of your parents, maybe you don't, which then, obviously thrusts us into overdrive. But you may see them on a regular basis, but the fact that you no longer see them like you did before starts to diminish that feeling of permanency. And so it's this part that we start to understand if we look back into our childhood and ask, did I or did my partner experience things where they felt that their parents were really there, that they showed up for them, that they said, when they said they were going to be there, they were, that when they needed them in an emotional way, they were available for them in that way. And this is where we get the first connections and the first doubts about anybody's permanency in our life. So this starts from very young childhood. Then we have the parts that happen when we're older. So we go through our childhood years, and maybe if we're quite young, we may have experienced, my parents divorced when I was 5, so I was very young when I experienced this. And even though I didn't necessarily understand so much what was happening, there was still that understanding that, well, my father and my mother didn't live in the same place anymore. I didn't see them as often. There was a challenge to that. Then as we get older, we have experiences that we go through that all, again, show us this impermanence of things. We have people passing. We move. Even, let's say, we're not even talking necessarily that we're adults, but as we get older, maybe you had to move somewhere with your family. Maybe someone you knew passed. Maybe there was a divorce. Any kind of life changes in general. What happens is if we don't process this correctly, if we don't understand and are able to absorb what that means and flow with it, then it gets stuck in our vibrational energy. And now we may be holding on to it, especially if we fear that we have something that causes pain, or even a sudden abandonment, like a passing of someone that's unexpected. And this will hold on to us. And now we've gained an experience that we didn't have before, where we thought everything is, la 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 and nice. And then all of a sudden something happens, you go, oh, this is what it's like. I remember I had a step-grandfather, and he was very, very lovely. He was from Scotland. He was so sweet. And I remember the night before his passing, I said to him, I'm so grateful I have you in my life. You're so fun, and I love being around you. And then the next day, he didn't wake up. And it was my first experience. I must have been probably about 10 or 11. And I thought, I won't hear his voice anymore. I won't see him anymore. We won't talk anymore. And all of a sudden, these things that were not necessarily taught as children become part of our awareness. And then that, if again not processed correctly, can then spur on a fear. You could have a fear of like, well, what if my mother dies then, or my father dies, or what if my dog dies, or whatever kind of thing. It can then spur on that. So we have the two challenges. What have we developed from our childhood, or our partner, if we know about their childhood? And what have I developed as I've gotten older and I've had experiences where I have felt abandonment and loss? So sometimes you may not think that moving is necessarily a feeling of abandonment, but especially when we're younger, if we feel like this is our home and this is our grounding and these are our roots, and then we're uprooted and put somewhere else, then all of a sudden the things that we felt were permanent become impermanent. And so that makes us question, what things can I count on? What things do I really believe will be there for us? And this is also why we all, as humans, and remember our 6 basic needs that we've talked about before, we desire a feeling of a permanency. We desire to know, this is why we get married and we say vows, I love you, I'll be with you forever. As we get older, we're like, we hope, but when you say it the first time, you're like, yes, forever. And then, after a while, you're like, yeah, it's a goal. We're not really going to promise it. It's a goal. So as we go through this, we're starting to understand, okay, where do these feelings come from? And if I have them myself, then this is something I need to recognize and work on so that I do not express symptoms of it that make the relationships I have become unhealthy. Okay? So this sense of abandonment that we may feel can give us all these negative emotions like a fear and heartache and anger and obsessiveness, possessiveness, confusion, sadness, anxiety, helplessness, feeling lost. I mean, so many things that can come from it. And it doesn't mean you experience it all the time, but you may experience it more often than others because of what you've been through. And in many cases of most of us, if not all of us, have had some sort of loss in our life, and we've experienced a sense of abandonment. But the question is, how much have we worked through that, and how much is still within us and holding us back? There's one other part I want to add. There's kind of like a third option, if you will, about abandonment, because we've talked about what we may have experienced in our childhood as well as growing up or in our adulthood. And there is one other thing, and this is, it's more of a Jungian theory, from Carl Jung, and that is that we collectively have put this idea of fear of abandonment into our society, into our thinking processes, because of so many stories and myths and things that we have read and absorbed in our life about abandonment, about a theme. So there's so many stories that we've read from childhood onward about people who have just given their everything and all to someone, and then that person has gone off to sea and never come back, or that person disappeared and that was the end. Even, when I think about the beginning of Cinderella, as her father's, going off somewhere on his horse and then has a heart attack and dies, and then she's like, oops, and now she's left with her stepmother and her stepsisters. Like, this is part of our society, is this constant feeling of, oh, this is something that may happen. So that may also be part and parcel of what we experience, because we've been told since we're little children. Sometimes it makes me wonder, growing up in Europe and in Germany and Austria, and especially in Germany, where we, a lot of the Hans Christian Andersen and the other, the Bruder Grimm, all of these fairy tales, Disney has changed some of the storyline a little to make it, let's say, more palatable. But these are still scary, miserable stories. If you really look at it, they just added a happy ending and they've taken out some of the gruesome bits. In the original Cinderella story from the Brothers Grimm, when the fellow is walking around the neighborhood trying to put trying to put the glass slipper on all the girls' feet. The girls in the real story, they're chopping their toes off, they're cutting their feet, they're bleeding, they're doing whatever to get that shoe on. That's not exactly the Disney version, but that was the original version. So, we understand as we go through, there's all of this, these storylines where there's just this abandonment, this loss, Bambi, all these stories, the Lion King, everybody dies and is gone and that's it. And so there's also an understanding of what our society, what we have grown up with, has put into our minds as something, to fear. So now let's talk about, and I think this is really important, I want to give you some of the symptoms, if you will, to look for. Now, some of them may sound kind of contradictory, but again, it's how people deal with these fears. So as I go through, you'll understand, but recognize that anything in an extreme is not a healthy reaction. We want to have the, as we say in German, the goldene Mitte, the golden middle, like that middle place, not too much this way, not too much that way. So the first thing is attachment, okay? And in attachment, you may have somebody who wants to attach very quickly. It's just like, boom, are we together? Can we label this? What is this? It's like you haven't even had a chance to get to know each other hardly, and they're looking for a major attachment. And very often, people who are suffering from a fear of abandonment will choose people to attach to who have very little availability, physically or emotionally. They will try to cling to someone who just cannot ever give them what they want without, let's say, therapy and work on themselves, but who are emotionally or even physically unavailable. On the other hand, you may find somebody who has an absolute failure to commit at all to any sort of long-term relationship. So you may say, well, Dawn, now you said one thing and you said the other, but you can have the middle, where somebody doesn't want to attach too quickly and somebody who doesn't say they don't want to attach at all. So these are both sides of the spectrum to look out for. Some people who have such a fear of experiencing this pain will try to keep their distance and not commit at all, so that they can keep themselves, as they may feel, safe from that. And I can tell you more times than not, unfortunately, how many, if you Google, you know, how to make him commit or make him stay, there's a million different videos on trying to manipulate someone in some way to cause them to want to commit. And I would really recommend people think about why this person doesn't want to commit in the first place, and ask yourself if this is something you really want to pursue. The next symptom, if you will, is somebody who's always aiming to please, right? So sometimes the fear of abandonment is so strong, especially hearkening back to childhood, how important it is for children who do go through some kind of therapy after they've lost a parent or their parents have gotten divorced, to understand it's not their fault in any way. Even, and I know as awful as this may sound, there are parents out there who do tell their kids, it is your fault. Can you imagine?
Wow.
Oh yeah, it happens. So how to be able to understand, if you are so afraid that someone will leave, you try to create this perfection. And I have a number of clients who will tell me all the ways they will bend over and contort themselves and do anything to try and meet the other person's needs for the fear of them leaving. And this is, you've lost your own identity when you've done this. Plus you're giving yourself a task that is never accomplishable, because you can never make yourself good enough to adjust yourself to be a person you believe someone else wants you to be. So if you see somebody who has no opinions, who is just doing whatever you're asking for, is always available, who is constantly trying to just, you know, they may be trying to show you love, but this is also a warning sign. Why is this person, you know, they're just always available, they're making, you know, everything to make my life better, they have no opinions of their own, they don't request anything. This is not a healthy sign either. You know, somebody should be, you know, and again, it's not about playing hard to get, as people will say. People literally should have their own life, you know, and be able to connect in ways that don't show that they don't value their own life and their own things that they are doing in their life. So let's also talk about the next one, which I know I have been guilty of, and that is staying in relationships no matter how unhealthy they are. That is a big one, right? How many of us, yeah, I know, right? I got a lot of people raising their hands. How many of us have, you know, not wanted to abandon or be abandoned and have just stayed longer than we should have to try and work things out? And again, I use the word should very loosely here, because again, everybody leaves when the timing is right and they understand and they've learned whatever lesson they need to learn from. But whether it's yourself or your partner, recognize, does this person stay in unhealthy relationships continually longer than they should? And have you? And if you have, make sure that now is the time that you work on recognizing, because if there is no, because why do we stay? We stay because, you know, of a fear of being alone, a fear of failing, a fear of hurting someone else. You know, there's a plethora of reasons, but all based in fear. So making sure that we are paying attention to how we're feeling, and am I really giving the effort needed to make a relationship work, or am I just staying in it because I don't want to end it for some reason? The next one is someone who may be overly critical. Okay, so you may find yourself with someone, or you may find yourself doing this as well, becoming very, very critical, that nothing is ever good enough. You cannot be pleased, or this person can never be pleased. There's nothing that's ever good enough. Very, very nitpicky about things. It seems like an odd piece to fall in abandonment, but it actually is one. It's kind of a way of keeping things at arm's length and never really fully committing in our heart, let's say, because we're constantly trying to show that something's not good enough, or the person's not good enough, or trying to match them into some way we believe they have to be in order not to abandon. So you may see someone who struggles with that. And, you know, this is a good way to recognize as well. Let's see. The other one, you know, I kind of talked about having difficulty being very intimate emotionally, but I don't know that I made it a specific symptom, so I just want to add that now, because it's one thing to be attracted to somebody who is not able to commit emotionally, but what if that person or yourself cannot commit to somebody intimately and emotionally? Many times it's because we've not experienced it ourselves. And this is not like a lesson that we have in school. We sit down and we have a class where everybody says, okay, let's learn how to be emotionally available. Let's learn how to share our emotions. Wouldn't that be great? And if we look back, so often we see generations and generations of things that we've been taught or how we're meant to behave. I will tell you that I watch and I see a little bit of a shift happening now, but sometimes I go out and I see, you know, parents outside with their children, or I watch videos, and it drives me bananas when I hear people saying things like, you know, are you going to be like a girl? You're going to cry? Are you going to, you know, and it's like right away we're being told, you know, especially if you're a man, do not show your emotions. That's like being a girl, which apparently is a bad thing, which I didn't know. But now we're being equated to being a girl is bad and showing your emotions is bad. You know, boys don't cry, you shouldn't cry, you know, hide your tears, don't show your emotions, stuff it down. And we're being taught this from, you know, childhood forward. Even, you know, with women, I see so often the advice being given, like, don't let them see you cry, don't let anybody know you're upset, you know, swallow it down, you know, from both sides. So how can we then better learn to be able to be that? And if we ourselves didn't have people close to us in our lives who really were emotionally available for us, how many people can you think about growing up that you really could pour your heart out and share everything to and feel not judged by and just unconditionally loved in sharing your thoughts and feelings? Right? Not a lot of us have had that, you know? Even maybe you might have been lucky to have one parent, or maybe you found a friend or somebody eventually in your life, hopefully. But as our first instances as children, again, one of the things we search for in our lives is to have love that is without condition, and to be able to find someone that you can share with and not be judged for. So understanding that if you've not had that, how do you turn around and give that to someone else? This is something we also have to learn as well, so that we can have a healthy relationship. Because if we can't do that, as we'll talk about in a little bit, we may be completely confused and surprised by our partner's reactions when we're like, what is your problem? You know, and they're saying, you're not emotionally available. And we're like, really? You know, may not even be something we're aware of. So talking about this and understanding. The next symptom, if you will, is feeling completely insecure and unworthy of love. Now, that's an extreme statement. It may be that a person you know or yourself may feel insecure or unworthy of love, or it may be something that you feel you need to prove in order to be in a relationship and to receive love, that you have to show, I am worthy, I am deserving, look what I do. I see a lot with my women clients. They say to me, I don't understand. I was the best girlfriend. I was the best wife. I did everything. And I'm like, okay, maybe that's the challenge. Or from even a lot of my male clients who will say to me, you know, I did absolutely everything. I gave her the world. I made her life wonderful. Why was nothing ever enough? And part of that comes from, why am I trying to prove my deservedness of love by giving everything to this other person and not expecting much in return? So can you say to yourself, now I feel completely deserving and worthy of love? And if you can, then wonderful. And recognize in a partner or a potential partner, does this other person feel very deserving and worthy? Or are they striving to show you that they should be loved? Next is trust issues, right? Again, when we're young, everything is trust. We believe everyone, we believe everything. And then something happens in life and we go, oh, someone can be like that. And even to this day, just the other day, I had a conversation with somebody and I was amazed and I thought, wow, there are people who think this way. And I guess I knew it exists, but I never experienced it. And I am sometimes completely amazed by the depths of the sadness I feel in people, and as well as the amazing amount of heroics I see. So it takes both sides. But when we talk about trust, has somebody or have you had something that where your trust was broken and there's a part of you that's not able to trust moving forward? Or do you project onto a new relationship a broken trust from the past? I had a client who his girlfriend had cheated on him, and one of the things she used to do was she'd go to the bathroom and take her cell phone with her, and she'd be writing to this guy. And so in a future relationship he had years later, you know, his girlfriend, who was a very kind of a workaholic anyway, she had a phone with her all the time, and sometimes she took it in the bathroom, and that absolutely triggered him, and he went into panic mode that she was cheating. There was no other signs except that trust that had been broken before. So one of the questions is, do I have trust issues? Or rightly so, maybe I have had trust broken, so I don't blindly trust everyone, but am I giving them the benefit of the doubt? And that's something, again, we have to work on if that's our own challenge. And if you're experiencing somebody who has that challenge, you have to ask yourself, is this something that I want to deal with? Because if they cannot trust you, no matter how trustworthy you are, that's going to lead to a very unhealthy situation. And trust also goes hand in hand with jealousy. Is a person able to, you know, have, you know, I don't even want to say a healthy amount, because some people like to have some sort of jealousy. I'm not that kind of person, but I understand there is realms within where it's understandable or acceptable, let's say. Or do you have somebody who's really often jealous of everyone you meet, where you're going, who you're spending time with? As I see people and clients who are middle-aged and older, sometimes they have challenges with how much time their partner wants to spend with their children versus them, you know, but that's a healthy situation. And if you think about it, you hope that your partner would want to spend time with their children. But again, are you able to accept this, or do you feel a jealousy? Do you feel yourself that someone cannot let you just be and is constantly in that fear? Again, because it's a fear of abandonment. I want to control situations, so you're not going to leave. Don't go talk to that person. Don't go away for too long. Don't, you know, stay somewhere overnight. All because of their own insecurity, because of that fear. I'm going to be left behind. And there's a couple more I want to, so one more I want to give is overthinking, overanalyzing, and trying to find hidden meanings. Sometimes you talk to somebody or you write them. Now, I know texting is really hard. That's why they invented emojis, because sometimes you don't know what the meaning was behind it. And if you see a smiley face, you might be like, okay, you know, I guess it's a good thing. Whereas if you didn't, maybe you think it was bad, or somebody types accidentally all in caps and you're like, why are you yelling at me? Like, texting is difficult. But understanding, am I having a conversation with somebody, and are they trying to read something in between the lines of what we're talking about? You know, or what did you mean by that? Or where are you going? Or what is that saying? Like this kind of desire to try and analyze and overthink, which we'll talk about a little bit later, when people start to get triggered because of their fears. And so if you notice that there's a communication challenge, or somebody's constantly overanalyzing what you're writing or saying, you may want to talk about that and see what kind of challenge that's coming from. And lastly, what I want to talk about is also a repressed anger and control issues. So as I was talking about before, sometimes a repressed anger, because I haven't dealt with the way I felt like I was abandoned before, that I feel this anger that's waiting to come out. If you were in yesterday's webinar that we did, I talked about the grape, and if you squish the grape, all that can ever come out is what's inside the grape, which is the grape juice. So if somebody squishes me and anger comes out, they didn't put the anger in me. I already had that inside me. I was just waiting for it to come out. And it's okay, we all have those emotions, but it's the decision of how it's going to come out, what I'm going to do with it. And if we're repressing that anger, believe me, something's going to make it explode. And the control, again, is what we do in order to eliminate the fear. So if the control becomes something directed to you, or you find yourself doing to others, hopefully not. But in most cases, when I work with clients, they're the ones who someone else is trying to put a control over. Like, you know, what time are you leaving? When are you coming back? Who are you talking to? How long are you talking to them? Are you going to wear that? Where are you going? You know, I mean, all kinds of strange things. I have a client who's actually their ex, put a GPS tracker on her car. Yeah, can you believe it? And, was following her around for like a while until she found out it was there. So, this is beyond. This is, and especially, and I will tell you this, especially for my clients who are very into social media, I cannot tell you, which I am not, goodness, but I cannot tell you how many times I talk to people who are analyzing and trying to figure out from pictures, where was this person? When was this picture taken? I see an elbow of someone else. Who was that? The background. Really, everybody's become like a detective, and they do this. And this is part of that controlling and this fear and this desire to be in the know and not have this person, whomever, do something different. So if you find yourself doing that, and you're spending a lot of time, as they call it, cyber stalking, this is a recognition that you may be suffering from a fear of abandonment. So what I was mentioning before, so those are some of the basic symptoms to think about and understand if you may have some of those, or you've been with or may be experiencing with your partner these symptoms. When the fear of abandonment shows itself, it's usually when there's a trigger, okay? And a trigger will then show you, uh-oh, I recognize there's something. So first we're together, we're getting to know each other, okay, it's all good. And then after a little while, we get into honeymoon phase. When honeymoon phase, we get into the real phase. And in the real phase is sometimes when we see, and hopefully we get to this point, sometimes we see the signs even earlier, which is good. But when we see the abandonment that happens, or the fear coming up, it comes from when something happens that triggers it. So for example, you get into a rhythm, right? So maybe you work and you have certain times when you're free and certain times when you do something, and you have sort of a routine. And a person may be used to writing you at certain times, and maybe your phone battery is dead, or you don't take your phone with you that day, or someone asks you impromptu to go to a lunch. And so a message was sent and your message goes unanswered longer than normal. And then that person starts to tick away in their brain, uh-oh, what if they don't like me anymore? What if there was somebody else? What are they doing? Maybe they don't, love me. Maybe they're getting ready to break up with me. All kinds of things that may happen. And sometimes we see the expression of it. What do they call it now? Like message bombing. Message bombing. You get like, the person's gone, or the phone's, out of range, come back and there's like 17 messages. Where are you? What's happening? What's going on? Okay. And you may ask yourself, so some people, they'll come to me and they'll say this person's psychotic. And I'm not going to say psychotic is the right term, but this person is clearly suffering from this fear of abandonment. And so they have played out a scenario in their brain, the biggest fear that they can have, because some part of the routine has been broken. And so when a person suffers from this fear will take over all the normal thoughts that are happening and put them into an absolute panic mode. And so the first place they will go is to the worst case scenarios. Not being loved, being cheated on, they're going to get broken up with soon. Does that make sense? I'm sure everybody, I see a lot of nodding heads, so people have experienced that. And so now we recognize where that comes from. And this is not, there's no amount of consolation that we can give to somebody to assuage that fear. That's something that they would have to work on. So I want you to recognize that, because if the person's not actively working on that, then you can be sure that this is an experience that will come up over and over again, because there is no amount of consolation that will help. So what happens when a person has this trigger or this fear? So I gave you one example where there's all these message bombing happening and they're just like da 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 da. Now sometimes it won't be that obvious. They may not, throw all the cards out in the first place. What they may do is a term that I hear a lot of times thrown around, become clingy, right? So there's a fear suddenly like, uh-oh, this may be taken away from me. So now I'm going to try and spend even more time with them. I'm going to try to be with them as much as possible. I'm going to demand that they prove that they love me in some way. And these limiting beliefs and this separation anxiety, leads them into this place where they say like, I can't be alone. If they leave me, my whole world is going to fall apart. No one wants to stay with me. I'm not lovable, whatever that is. And so now the only way to let's say, try to relieve that anxiety becomes clinging to the other person. So the one person who's actually triggering the fear of abandonment becomes a person that they become dependent on not to feel abandoned. Does that make sense? So it's like asking the person who's torturing you to ease you from the torture. That it doesn't make sense, but that's what happens. And so in some levels, it can be so intense, that every time there's a call that isn't answered, or a misinterpretation of a word, it becomes devastating. And when people use these words, and again, I go back to sort of what Jung was talking about, it drives me bonkers when I hear songs, where people are like, I'm going to die without you, or even that famous line from the movie I never saw where he says, you complete me, or blah, blah, blah. It's like, no, I'm fine. I'm complete. And if you come in, you bring your stuff, and that's nice. And if you go, you take your stuff with you, but you don't take me with you. I'm good, right? So we need to rethink our thought process about this. And if you are with somebody and they say these things or start to behave this way, this is your red flag. This is not good. I am not your everything, nor am I needed for you to be able to exist. You existed before, you'll exist after. So understanding this is part of where we can help to recognize when there are triggers or somebody who could be triggered because of those fears. Does that make sense so far? Okay, good. So like I said, so number one response can be clinging tighter. So guess what happens when this person starts to behave this way? So now let's say we're the person who doesn't have that challenge, and the other person does. And because of that, we living our life, doing whatever, and all of a sudden we start to notice there's like a lot more attention, a lot more desire to be around, not having any space. So the natural tendency, what do you think would be when that person starts to feel excessive coming towards them? Anyone, what do you think you would do?
Back off.
Exactly. So now we're asking for space, and guess what that does to the person who fears abandonment?
Rejection.
Exactly. Now they're in fear of rejection, because now the one thing that they are trying to avoid, that they fear the most, they have created because of that energy. And we may be completely lost as to why this is happening, because we don't understand the mechanisms of what's going on in the story they're playing out in their brain, because it's not being shared with us. And that's why we have to be aware and look for the symptoms now and recognize whether it's our own or someone else's, so we can see the patterns that are developing and why these cycles are occurring. So in other cases, you may have people who will just run, not the clinging, but the opposite, because they are afraid. They're thinking, oh, they're going to break up with me. This is not good. I better break up with them first. And they literally go through that. And so they may just go out and disappear, and they have such difficulty in trusting, and they have such a fear of becoming vulnerable, that they will just take off. And I say it in terms like they could take off, like literally, like leave, but if they're married, they may just completely back off or disassociate or make a wall or a boundary, because they're so fearful of being hurt that they're not going to allow that level of intimacy, so that they can't be hurt, or think that they can't be hurt. So they've now created that distance. So you may be the person who has no idea why this is happening. You're just living your life and you're with this person, and suddenly you feel, or maybe even from the beginning on, you have felt, this person's not really that close to me. Like, I know they care about me and we spend time together, but they don't seem to be sharing a lot of their feelings, or they don't seem to be wanting to have like a deeper level of intimacy. In some cases, they may not know how, because they've never been showed, but in other cases, they may be consciously or subconsciously doing this because they're trying to keep themselves away from that fear, away from that possibility of being hurt that way. So this is number two. First is clinging. Number 2 is separating, whether physically or emotionally or both. And number 3 is like the kind of detective that I was talking about before. There's so little trust that they're constantly looking for holes in your story. You say, oh, wait a minute, I thought you said you had lunch at 2 o'clock. Now you're saying it was 2:15. Which one was it? Like, I don't remember. I think it was 2, maybe it was 2:15. You know, in this case, it's impossible for these people to open up. They can't expose their fears, their hopes, their passions, their emotions. They have such a fear of abandonment that it takes over their ability to trust. It takes over their ability to have a relationship and let it flow, because for them, it seems too risky. So when you find yourself being questioned, you know, like to a degree that feels very uncomfortable and, you know, not normal, then you need to ask yourself, why is this person behaving in such an untrustworthy manner? You know, if there has been no cause for that, like there hasn't been a prior indiscretion, then what am I taking on that someone else may have caused this person to experience? And so again, at the end of the day, is a lack of trust just because we're not able to trust and that's where it ends? Or is a lack of trust a symptom of the fact that if I trust you, then you might hurt me or leave me. So I better not trust you, or I better try and look for things to find. So you don't want anyone looking for things, you know, where are you going? What are you doing? Well, who are you talking to? What's happening there? You know, it's not a way we want to live. So again, for those of us who have stayed in situations that have been unhealthy longer than we should, these are some tips to recognize those things and probably save ourselves some time and some heartbreak in going through that scenario when we can see in the beginning, uh-oh, this is a sign I do not want to be in this. So when I talked about the clinginess, the running, the detective suspicious work, the last one, which I kind of talked about very early in when we started, was the ones who feel like everything is their fault. You know, my dad left, you know, even subconsciously, was it my fault? You know, my mom left, you know, whatever it is, somewhere I couldn't be loved, and that's why this happened. And so they try to figure out, what am I doing wrong? Okay, and so I get these calls. What am I doing wrong? Why can't I make myself lovable? What can I do to make them love me? And now completely lose their own sense of self and identity, because the whole time they're trying to make themselves be loved in some way. And so now, and again, like I said, they're bending and contorting and doing everything they can to make the other person happy. Why? Because they're so fearful of being alone. So if they think, you know, they see their partner maybe looks at somebody on TV and says, oh, you know, she's lovely. And they're like, oh, he likes blondes, he likes them tall, he likes big boobs, I better go get surgery, I better change my hair. I mean, anything can be physical, can be emotional, whatever they think. You know, oh, she seems to like people who have, you know, a nice car, I better go get a different car. You know, oh, she likes guys with other hair, let me go get hair. I mean, whatever it is. So in some ways, there's a neglect of a calmness, a stability, being ourselves, because this person has created all these imaginary stories in their head, and they decide that they need to change something in order to be able to be loved, to be desirable. And instead of looking for that own love and that own stability within, they're now constantly looking for it from some external place, which might be you. And if you're not giving them that validation that they're lovable or they're beautiful or whatever in enough time, then it's like a monster that can never be fed enough. And so this is, again, an unhealthy and not stable situation. Now, it doesn't mean that everybody who's had challenges in their past or poor childhoods or whatever are going through life just screwed up and, you know, fearing abandonment or what have you. We all have challenges we have to work through, and some of us have worked through it more than others. So it's a choice we're going to make in a relationship, or if we're already in one. Do we make the time and the effort to work on these things together, that everyone's working on their own selves and together we are growing? Or If I'm just looking at a relationship saying, do I really want to get involved in this? Because clearly I know I need work, but this person needs work. And unless I see them actively working on themselves, this may not be a challenge I want to take on. And we don't have to. And for all of those out there, and myself, I have been included in this group before. For those of us who are trying to fix and save and help those poor souls out there, ask yourself if you want a partner or a project. Okay?
Would it motivate somebody to cheat?
How do you mean?
Well, if they are fearful that you're going to abandon them, they may look somewhere else for that love and
100%, 100%. I can tell you that, yes. There are people who I just recently even had conversation with who told me because they were so fearful that the other person was pulling away because they said that they got clingy, that they started to talk to somebody else because they were feeling like they were going to get dumped soon. And when the person didn't dump them and then found out what they had done, they broke it off. So again, it ended up becoming the one thing they feared the most because they created that scenario. Had they been able to accept that this person just wanted some space and given it to them, they would have most likely appreciated that and come back with open arms. It's one of the rules I have of relationship. And relationship is like two fingers here being held, and imagine there's a rubber band around it. And so there's always a certain amount of tension that is the acceptable amount within a healthy relationship. And when one starts to pull, what happens is it usually snaps the other one closer because they want to keep that certain amount of tension at all times. If we all come in too close, then we have no tension, the rubber band falls down. And if we pull too far, we can just snap it and break it. So that's the play within the healthy relationship. So when a person is saying, I just need a little space, and we don't freak out and think that means it's going to be over and we give it to them, then as they get to the point where the space is enough, it snaps back. But again, where does this come from? That faith that this is healthy and this is good and I'm lovable and worthy of it, and not that if the person gets any chance to go anywhere without me or look at anything, that's it, they're going to leave, right? If we have a faith in ourselves that, we are lovable. And, it's like people ask me about my husband and myself, and I'll say, well, I'm not the best, but I think I'm the best for him. I think that we are a good match and we're the best for each other. And so he can look somewhere else. He may find someone taller, smarter, more money, blah, 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 better. Hard to find, but hey, it exists, I'm sure. But that even with that, it doesn't mean the package of everything that I know that we have, that we offer each other. So it takes time to get to that place. I was not like that. I was a long time hating myself, not loving myself, and believing that I was deserving of having somebody who was emotionally unavailable to me, as well as treating me like crap. So working through this process, we understand, and this is work, whether it's ourselves or someone else, you have to do that work to let go of that fear. So in the last part of what I want to share is that when we're on the other side of things, right? When we're the one who is not suffering from this abandonment, and we have somebody who we see, in a way having a reaction that we cannot understand why this reaction is happening, then we can see that the partner with the fear of abandonment is so fearful of the behaviors that we have because they can't understand them. So if we say, I'm just going to go for a walk and I want to just hang out alone today, or I just need some time by myself, if they can understand that, there's no challenge. If they can understand that, then that's when these fantasies and stories start playing out in their brain. And from the partner who on the other side does not understand what story is being played out in their brain, it just seems like the other person is behaving in some erratic or unexplained way. And then naturally we're going to have a reaction to it. So you have one person who might, again, in the first example, you might say, well, I need some space. I need to go take care of some things, and now the other person is fearful. And so they're like, okay, I'm going to spend all the time with you. I'm going to show up where you are. I'm going to go where you are. I'm going to call you every 5 minutes. And now we feel like we're suffocating. right? And so the suffocating person says, okay, you know what? I need to have some space. They start to get even more fearful because of that. And then they may become demanding, like, let me give you some gifts. Let me be extreme. Let me, do everything I can to make you want me and bring you back. So this self-fulfilling prophecy can occur. And as I said, no matter how much the other person, they say, I'm not going anywhere, I'm not leaving, you can trust me, it's going to be fine. There is no consoling, because that is just working on the symptoms, not the cause. So, we cannot help that situation. There's not enough ability that we have to make that person feel trusting or relaxed or lose that fear of abandonment. Is something they have to work on. And if there's any signs you see in yourself, is something that we recognize that we also need to work on, so that we don't start to either have people push away from us or create these destructive subconscious patterns. So in the last minutes that we have, and I'll tell you, it's hard to get all of this into one session. There's so much about it. But what I want to share is there are many different strategies. If it's for ourselves, we can do things such as NLP, neuro-linguistic programming. We can do EFT, which I have done a class on before as well. If you don't remember it, you can go back and look or ask me for it, and I'll send you the video on it. Can be talk therapy. But the core challenge for anyone experiencing this is the feeling of being left out or left behind. Okay? So one way that we can work on this, whether it's ourselves or someone else, is people need to, and this is again one of the 6 basic human needs, people need to be engaged in activities that make them feel included, that make them feel accepted, right? And to be themselves, forgiving and accepting of themselves, building up a self-esteem. The fear of abandonment is tied into an insecurity, a fear of our own not having enough confidence in ourselves. So building up our confidence helps to shift and remove that fear. And part of that comes from feeling included, feeling that there is love for us, feeling that people can enjoy being around us. And I know in this landscape of the world, it can be very difficult to find a way to do that. But whether you join a group today, even though I, identify myself as, I would say, mostly Jewish, I also have joined this, what do they call it? A Unitarian church, and it's very new to me. But I don't really know if that's considered a religion, but it's something that it's so great. There's just a group of people that just all share the same ethics that I have. And so after the sermon, in the Zoom, they kind of click off, and then everybody has these little boxes, looks like the Brady Bunch, beginning of that show, but expanded to like 100, and everybody's talking to each other, and then they break out into groups. But it's this feeling of a community where there's a common theme, where we all get together and we talk and we share ideas, and then we feel like, wow. And people are happy to see you. Hey Dawn, hey Don, hey Sandra, hey Susie, like all of us, getting to see each other. And it's so nice. And so everyone to some extent needs that. So if you are a person who may have some fear of abandonment still within you, then I recommend finding a group. Don't look for it in your partner. You will get something from your partner as well, but external to that. Join a group or something where people you can just chat with and feel yourself included. Because remember, fear of abandonment is a fear of being left out or left behind. And so when people recognize and want to spend time and make you feel good, that helps to build up our self-esteem. So that's an external way we can do it. An internal way is also by using affirmations. And I'm a big believer in affirmations when they ring true for ourselves. So I have a list, and I'm going to send this out to everybody's email afterwards. And I want you to take a look at it, and maybe something that you use for yourself, you share with someone else you may know who might need this. And as we go through the affirmations, I recommend to tweak it in a way that it feels real to you. So for example, the first sentence is, I'm completely confident of who I am and the greatness I offer. Now I will tell you, when I left my last relationship, if I said that, I would have vomited to even try and get those words out of my mouth. There's no way I would have believed that. And I had to really work hard I'm being able to say, I am confident of who I am, and there is a greatness. There is a part of me that had been taught from generations, don't have an ego, don't act like you're so great. You shouldn't feel, you should just be very, very humble and not talk about your ability and just, and so much criticism that I had experienced that it was implausible for me to believe that there was the spark of greatness within me. But when I recognized and made it true for me by saying, I share within me the same greatness that I see in others, that we are mirroring each other, that I don't alone feel like I am greater than others, but that I have a greatness within me as I see greatness in others. And that became more palatable to me. When I could say, you know what, I make good choices and I feel that I honor my values and my ethics. As I did that, then I could say, you know what, I am confident of who I am, not in comparison of what I have achieved or a level of success, but rather just who I am. So look at these sentences and make it true for you, right? The second one, which I think a lot of people who've joined today will recognize, is it's okay to let go of control and fear. So to say to ourselves, it's okay to let go of it. It's not easy. And all of us are working through a fear we have. I have come miles through my claustrophobia, but there is still a part I hold on to, and that's the elevators. I've not gotten over. I've stepped in a couple, which is huge for me, but there's still that fear. And I have not let go of it because there is a belief that it keeps me safe. In my brain, there's a part that says, that's just a coffin going up and down, so don't get in it. And so part of me holds on to that fear because it believes it's keeping me safe. And then I have moments where I use my visualization, where I practice my warrior self, and I say, okay, what would Wonder Woman do? Wonder Woman, there's no movie where she cries about getting in an elevator. She just goes in, So I try to tap into that self, and I have that moment. It's not easy. And then I get out and I kiss the ground and I'm like, whoa, did it. But this is part of that. Is it okay to let go of that fear? Because we don't let go of it because we believe it keeps us safe. So as we repeat to ourselves, it's okay to let go of my fear, it's okay to let go of control, then we start to find ways to do such. I'll just read a couple more. Another one is, I choose to be only in relationships that make me feel good. Hallelujah, right? I cannot tell you how many people have not experienced a real healthy relationship or have had experiences that they should have, that they don't even know that they can choose to only be in those kind of relationships. I had a client I talked to the other day, and we were talking about, things that they may have had someone do for them. And I said, what about somebody making you dinner? And he said, it's probably been 20 years since anyone's done that for me. And I said, wow, okay, so you should know that you deserve to be in a relationship that makes you feel good. And if that makes you feel good, that's part of that. And to recognize that so often we get caught up. And I think, again, it can be society, it can be something we're used to. Even if it's not healthy, if it's comfortable, we tend to gravitate to it. Even if it's not healthy, but it's comfortable because we're used to it. I had the belief until, thank God, about 12 years ago, that you just work and you don't like your work and your boss is always a jerk and you just wait for the weekends and you hope to get holiday and then you hope that you either win the lottery or you can retire early and you can enjoy your life. Because that's what I was taught. And then one day when I had the epiphany and I was able to work and do something that now I have to remind myself to take days off because it doesn't even feel like work to me, then I'm like, oh, I should take a day off. Okay, I'll do that. Or I take half a day off because I love what I do and I enjoy it and I don't want to stop. So being able to shift that around and say, in my relationship, I can feel good. I can have a good time. It can be effort, but it doesn't have to be work. It doesn't have to be miserable. So being able to sense that, being able to tell ourselves that. And the last one I'll share with you now, and there's more in the list which I'll send, is I release the fear of losing others. So if there has been a time where we have experienced loss, whether it's been a physical or emotional loss, it's okay to say, I release that fear of losing others. And whatever makes sense for you, if you can't say that, maybe you say, every day I'm learning how to release that fear. Every day I'm getting closer to releasing that fear. Because if that's still stuck in our emotional energy, then it's a block that's not allowing us to move forward. And if we see in the other person that this fear is holding them back or not allowing us to thrive, then that's a sign that we need to, either find another partner or work through that if we see that that's something we know they're working on. So, as I said, I will take this list, I'm going to send it to everybody, use it, tweak it however you see fit. You can just do a couple of them, you can read the whole list. I mean, obviously we can't do like 1,000 affirmations a day, but we can pick and choose the ones that work for us, and switch it up on different days. You may laugh, but I have a set of affirmations that I have in the bathroom that are ones that I'll just read randomly, when I'm getting ready and doing my hair, I put it on the mirror. And then I have a different affirmation that's all my abundance and wealth affirmations that's in my closet, so that when I'm getting dressed, I'll just pick up one, whatever my subconscious puts my eye on, that'll be the one for the day. And I'm like, okay, and I read that one. And so you just pick and choose through the day which ones that you like to focus on. But I think this is a really helpful list. And if you know somebody who's struggling with this, maybe something you even want to share with them. So as concisely as I could make it, this is the webinar on abandonment, and I hope that this has at least brought some awareness to what it is, to how to recognize it, and what to do if you find yourself experiencing it or with somebody who is experiencing that. And through this, hopefully, we can work on having healthier and better relationships, moving forward, whether we're in a relationship or starting a new one or hoping to start one. Let's all raise ourselves up to become our highest and best self. The rising tide lifts all ships. So let's raise them up together. Sound good? Excellent. Okay. All right, everybody. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. As I mentioned the other day, next weekend is Rosh Hashanah, so I will be in prayer. I might actually have a session I'm holding before that. It depends on if I have enough interest during the week, maybe in the evening. But we'll find out. I'll let everybody know and see what everyone's schedule looks like. But either way, I will be thinking of all of you and praying for everyone and praying for a better world for us to wake up to soon. And I hope that everybody will just have a great, great week filled with a lot of abundance and happiness and as little to no fear as possible. All right. Well, thanks everybody for joining. Thanks, Don. Nice to see you. Thanks, Cheryl, Susie, Sandra. Thanks everybody. Take care and have a great week.